our idea of what healthy was turned into, oh, well, I went to Whole Foods and there was this, oat bran pasta or something. And that's healthy because it's at Whole Foods and because it says whole grain on it. But really, it's just processed food in a box.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We're your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey guys, I'm Hilda Labrada Gore, and this is episode 181. Our guest today is Brian Sanders, the man behind the documentary Food Lies. Brian's story is super intriguing because he didn't start out as any kind of nutritionist or dietitian. He has a mechanical engineering degree from UCLA, as a matter of fact. But now he is a health coach committed to ancestral health, and he has founded a company called Sapien. Today he tells us how he got from there to here and why he is leading a movement to ditch dietary dogma and get to the roots of our ancestral wisdom. He goes deep today. He helps us understand where we've gone wrong, why we're fatter and sicker than any previous generation, and much more. He debunks food fads. He points out how wrong we've gotten our macronutrients, and he makes a strong case for the fact that nutrition does not have to be as complicated as we've made it out to be. Before we get started, a quick thank you to you. Thanks to you, the Wise Traditions Podcast is in the top 5% of independent podcasts. Thank you so much for listening and sharing the show. And right now we are so close to 400 reviews in iTunes. If you haven't rated and reviewed the show before, go there right now, and you could very well be the person who takes us over the top. So thank you. And thanks to our sponsor, Ancestral Supplements. They are the makers of gallbladder with ox bile. Based on ancient wisdom of like supports like, they put New Zealand-sourced nose-to-tail organ meats and bone marrow in convenient gelatin capsules. Order yours today at ancestralsupplements.com. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Brian.
Thank you, Hilda.
I am so excited to have you on because you have a phenomenal story and you are headed in an important direction with some of the work you're doing. Let's start out with your own kind of health wake-up call a few years ago when you lost your father to prostate cancer and your mother started getting sick. Tell us that story.
Yeah, it really was a wake-up call. It's right around, you turn 30 and you can't eat what you want, anything you want anymore. And right about then, my dad died and my mom is in the last stages of Alzheimer's. So that's right about the time when you think, I can't be a kid anymore. I have to take control of my health. And that's also about the time when my friends were getting into ancestral health. And I was like, what is this? Mark Sisson and all these kind of things like Rob Wolf. And so I started going down that path. And I was always in pretty good shape. I was athletic my whole life. And I thought I was doing well. But I realized I wasn't. I look back at those pictures and I was like, wow, I was just sort of skinny fat. I was sort of this pudgy guy that, had all these problems. And those really started coming to surface when I started changing my diet. And then I was like, whoa, there's a whole new level out there. There's a whole new level of how you can feel, not be inflamed, lose fat that I didn't know I had, and have consistent energy all day. All these great things happened once I started changing my diet into a more appropriate ancestral diet.
And you really approach this intellectually too, because your background is in engineering, right? So you were kind of methodical about how you went about examining the evidence and the facts about what we should eat.
Yeah, I think my engineering background really helped me. A lot of people in the health space that I respect are engineers. Not that you have to be, but they just come at it from this different angle where it's like a root principle approach, right? It's the systems architecture. It's being unbiased. It's using the scientific method. And yeah, I'm not just going to jump on anything and just do it. It's like, I heard that veganism is the way to go. It's like, well, I'm going to look into that and I'm going to think about all these things and where everything aligns and where it doesn't align. And, everything really clicked into place when you look at this from an ancestral perspective.
Well, talk to us about that. How did it click? What was that simple framework that you landed on? I think somewhere I saw written down that you said something about 6 lines of scientific evidence on what we should eat. Can you explain that?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of for the film too, is I just wanted to look at everything, right? So I read all the different books from different angles. I watch vegan videos just to figure out where they're coming from, right? I want to see this from all sides. And so I kind of picked these 6 lines of evidence, like, well, evolution, biochemistry, randomized controlled trials, epidemiology, and then kind of like gut biome and genetics, like that kind of whole thing. And when you look at it under the light, if you look at nutrition and human diet, under all of these things, it all aligns under one type of diet, right? So I've heard of Weston A. Price, and I understand the principles, and, I looked at so many other sides. What was so interesting to me is when I looked at all these sides and did all this work for a year and a half straight, which is what I quit my job and have been doing this for a year and a half, really hardcore. They all landed on these same principles. Everything made sense. There was no big problems. Like when you look at a vegan diet, you see these big holes in it, right? So when I looked at all these different lines of evidence, they all lined up under one thing. And then I realized that that's the Weston A. Price diet. It was so interesting because I didn't, I kind of was going around it the whole time and didn't even know it. But I kind of, if I wrote it down, like, this is the ideal diet. And then just in the past few months, I'm like, oh, of course, this is what Dr. Price found.
Exactly. Talk to us about some of the things that strengthened your resolve or your understanding that this kind of wise traditions way of living and eating would be the best, and some of the holes that you saw in veganism.
Well, yeah. I mean, I love the part around pregnancy, around when he went around the world and found that all these cultures did the exact same thing. And so the body knows what it wants. I love this, like, trial and error and intuition and generational knowledge that people have figured out all over the world that you can't deny. I mean, we have all the science in the world right now, but we can't figure out something simple like what to eat. Yet all the cultures around the world, without any real science, figured it out independently. So that shows me that it's the truth, right? And then you can look at veganism, which is like an ideology more than an actual scientific way to approach nutrition. You see that they have to ignore a lot of things that don't make sense. And I try to talk to them because I have no problem people eating whatever they want, right? You can make your own choices, but when it encroaches on my freedoms to, that's what it sounds like they're trying to make happen, is encroaching on our choices. I try to talk to them and see how they think. And there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, and they don't really have the full picture or ignore a lot of things.
Like, for example, I have a friend who's a vegan, and she was kind of shocked recently to realize that without animal byproducts and manure, even waste, plants can't grow, really. So there's a conundrum there, right? So you need the animal products on the soil to make it rich enough for the carrots to grow. But if you tried to not have that involved, it wouldn't work as well. And you're creating all this synthetic stuff. So is that some of the dissonance you're talking about?
Exactly. And then I spent 8 months trying to get a vegan activist person to talk to me because they find me on social media and they know what I'm doing. And we're not going to get anything done just going back and forth with little one-liners on a chat. Like, just talk to me. Finally got someone to talk to me, and we talked for an hour and I actually recorded it. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but there's just this mental block. It's very strange where they can't accept some things, and she didn't even know what to say. Like, she couldn't respond to some of my things. So yeah, it's hard.
And is part of the mental block that we're maybe removed from our own intuition and gut? Do you know what I mean? Like, we're just looking to the experts, the so-called anointed, as some people call them, for answers. And so we have learned to disconnect from where we really want to go and what our bodies really want.
Exactly. And a lot of them, they take some YouTube video as gospel. They get their information there. It's like, well, why is this the end all be all of information? Like, did you actually look up the source of this information? And then also, a lot of times they're the most disconnected from how food is made. These people are in Santa Monica, Whole Foods, sipping on a vegan latte. Is what I picture them, and I have seen them, and I know them, and they are that. Obviously not all of them, but they're not, say, regenerative farmers or Tara Couture, who you had on the podcast that I actually just got off a long phone call with, up doing her own farmstead and actually knowing how the process works. It's never them. Those are never the vegans. It's always the person in the city who has a lot of money, usually because they can afford to do this sort of inappropriate diet.
So are we fat and sick because we're also disconnected from the land, from where our food comes from, do you think?
Yeah, well, that's a long story, but that could be kind of the root of it. I mean, if you really look at the biggest picture, it's losing that connection. But what does that mean technically, or how did that play out? Is I think we got away from what we're supposed to eat. Where I think the biggest thing is we're eating. It's not a surprise to people, the processed foods. So that's this new modern way of thinking, where it's just an example of how we got away from what we thought before, or what we knew before, is that we thought, oh, this modern convenience or this new technology is going to make food better. And that is, to me, after all my research, it's the number one thing, is just the act of processing the food, making it less nutrient dense instead of more nutrient dense. It all comes down to how many steps away from nature the food is. And that's a number one problem. If you ate just whole foods, it's pretty hard to get overweight or sick. I don't know who these people are who are truly eating a whole foods diet of whatever composition, it's pretty hard. So I think that's where we really went wrong. And our idea of what healthy was turned into, oh, well, I went to Whole Foods and there was this, oat bran pasta or something. And that's healthy because it's at Whole Foods and because it says whole grain on it. But really, it's just processed food in a box. So people don't even know what healthy is anymore.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I feel like we're promoted, or so many things are pushed on us that have that healthy label. They'll say gluten-free and heart healthy and all these things. And we think, oh, okay, that's great. But like you're saying, it's just all packaged up and tied up with a bow. So we think it's good for us. But who's behind that and why? I can only imagine it's a multi-million-dollar industry, actually.
It's this long process. It's this long story. I mean, part of the film I'm making goes over the history of, what we got wrong in the 1950s. It's kind of this, it all started with this bad science, and, there's a whole Ansel Keys story and cholesterol and saturated fat, but really it's not much of a conspiracy. It's just that people, we got some bad information, and it opened the door for these big companies to come in and like, oh, well, low fat's good. Well, how do you do low fat? Well, you have to process out the fat. And then what do? You put back in sugar, you put back in these cheap ingredients and the flour and the refined grains and fake fats and vegetable oils, and it's so cheap. And it was just an accident. I'm not one of these people who thinks it's this crazy conspiracy. It's just we gave them the green light to do this, and companies want to make money, and that's what they do. So they, over the last 60 years, they just started making money, and it just spun out of control. So, yeah.
And of course, they don't want to turn around because they're rolling, right? So they're not going to be the ones that are going to say, oops, we got it wrong.
Yeah, obviously not. They're going to keep it how it is. There's no money in Whole Foods exactly, so they don't know what to do. But I know that they actually are trying to shift. I've talked to some farmers, big, large-scale farmers that do really good work in regenerative agriculture, and there's, a guy saying that he's kind of consulting for some big company, right? These big food manufacturers, in a good way, actually, because they realize there's this demand, and he's kind of helping them figure out how to incorporate some better foods in their product line. So it's a kind of hopeful in a way.
Well, that definitely is. Talk to us a little bit about the macronutrient misinformation that we've been fed, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. It's funny to me that we got each one of the macronutrients so wrong. That's how all our problems started, is we were confused on each one. Where with protein, there's this big meat demonization thing that some other people like Dr. Gary Fettke could talk way more detail about. It's actually really interesting to me. It's like, why do we think meat is bad? And there's this long history of Seventh-day Adventists and, all these different things that kind of built up into bad science and then even like hippie movement or diet for a small planet. And, these people in the 60s and 70s thinking that this is the way we can change the world and feed the world is to not eat meat. So we just got the protein aspect wrong. We just had this idea that meat was bad. And then we got carbohydrate wrong too. I think that we just thought, well, if saturated fat is bad, then carbs must be good. And what do carbs mean in a modern industrialized world is just processed carbs and sugar. And so that turned into the whole heart healthy whole grain. And then, of course, we got fat wrong. We all know that the healthy animal fats are the way to go. And again, we just got it completely wrong. Like, let's just see how cheap and how mass production we can get this vegetable oils. And it's just crazy that we got every single one of them wrong. And that's really what you could say just changed everything for our diet. Like, that's just where it all started, where we just went south.
And what if someone were to say to you, I don't see how you're saying we got it wrong. Like, the problem is people are actually eating too much meat and too much fat. What if they were still on that train? How would you convince them that we are headed in the wrong direction? We need to turn back to our wise traditions of the past.
That's the really hard part, and that's what I deal with on a daily basis, because people know I'm making the film and they come out of the woodwork and they try to attack me on all these points. And for one, the biggest thing I can do is just make this film. I think we need a film. Not just to, toot my own horn about making a film, is that people aren't going to read a ton of books. How much information is going to take for someone to figure out the stuff that we all know here, listening to this podcast? Well, these people probably read books, read Weston Price's book, looked at research, listened to podcasts, did 1 million hours of research, but no one's going to do that. So you can give them a 90-minute film that they can stream from the comfort of their own home and give them all this information. And it'll take 90 minutes of audio-visual information and science and graphs and analogies and experts to really show them that. So there's no simple thing where you can just show them that in a 5-minute conversation. I mean, really, you can try and you could just talk about how our ancestors lived, which is what I try to do. But, it's only so much you can do.
And maybe those facts can also persuade them to open their eyes to what's happening around them. Because I think, for example, your wake-up call was actually that it touched so close to home with your parents. And I think a lot of people are getting that wake-up call, but some people think, I imagine they shrug their shoulders and think, well, that's just what happens when you get older. You get cancer or you get Alzheimer's or some autoimmune condition. So they don't quite make the connection between diet and health.
Yes, that's one of the biggest connections I want to make. And what I've struggled with every day is trying to make people figure out that maybe you're doing okay and you're 20 and you can eat whatever you want, but it's not going to stay like that.
Coming up, Brian talks about how in your mid-30s, you start to feel the ill effects of the bad dietary recommendations. And he discusses how critical it is for the younger generation to avoid the fate of many of their parents.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions Podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
The Heal Your Gut Guy. Are you dealing with digestive issues? Do you react to delicious sourdough bread and other starches? Do you pay dearly when you eat cheap foods? Mike, the Heal Your Gut Guy, has also suffered from these issues even when following Weston A. Price dietary principles. Mike will show you the extra steps he took to heal himself and many others of gut issues like Crohn's, colitis, IBS, SIBO, and Candida. Mike will show you how to heal your gut 100% naturally without drugs. The Heal Your Gut Guy YouTube channel page has the videos you need to heal your gut. You don't have to walk a dietary tightrope. Just search for the Heal Your Gut Guy on YouTube. You'll find tons of free information rooted in the laws of Mother Nature and ancestral wisdom. and Gallbladder with Ox Bile by Ancestral Supplements. Ancestral Supplements offer New Zealand-sourced nose-to-tail organ meats, bone marrow, and gallbladder with ox bile in simple, convenient gelatin capsules. Our early Native American ancestors would commonly take a buffalo, cut it open on the spot, and eat the warm liver seasoned with gallbladder and bile. The bile was sprinkled on various organs and glands as a condiment, the way we might use mustard today. Word has it that gallbladder and bile did a whole lot more than just improve the taste. Gallbladder, ox bile, and liver provided concentrated amounts of gallbladder-specific building blocks, bile and liver that support our biliary tract, gallbladder, liver, bile ducts, and the like, and are now absent from the modern diet. So visit ancestralsupplements.com to see what they can do for you. Ancestral Supplements, putting back in what the modern world has left out.
You can't give people their future. No one wants to hear that. No one's going to accept that information, basically, right? If you can talk to blue in the face that if you're eating a vegan diet, a low-fat, raw vegan diet, that soon your health is probably going to go south. No one will accept that. So it's almost impossible to tell people about their futures. You just have to give them other information to inform their decisions and ask them to really look at their diet and how they really feel.
And they may see also what you're seeing with their own parents. Talk to us a little bit about this generational divide or this generational issue that you see cropping up with health concerns.
Yeah, that actually is turning into be one of the big themes of the film. Is we're following around a woman in LA who has some health problems, and her parents are in the same situation as mine. And we realize that it's like, we're 35. This is when your health catches up to you. And now we're dealing with the ill effects of these bad dietary recommendations and these bad ideas we've been on for food for so long. Our parents have suffered from this, and we have to not fall to the same fate. And then we also have to kind of be the ones to help turn things around. And that's really important to me. And there's a great quote from Nina Teicholz in her great book, The Big Fat Surprise, where she says, but like lost languages, lost skills, and lost songs, it takes only a few generations to forget. And she was, of course, talking about our diet and how lost we've gotten in the past 60 years. And it's such a powerful quote to me that I didn't really think about. It's like, yeah, I actually don't know anything about my great-grandparents. Like, it just takes a couple generations for you to completely lose track of something like a song or just dietary advice. And, our great-grandparents were eating raw butter, raw milk, eating off the land, like all this stuff. So that's really the big theme of the film, is just looking at this generational sort of obligation we have to not let the next generation suffer from the same consequences.
And it's not just the film, Brian, right? You've got a podcast, you've got your Sapiens website, you've got a lot of projects because you're trying to get the word out any way you can, correct?
Exactly. My goal is to do so much more than just make a film. It's to give people voices, even just not just me. I'm kind of like a communicator, like you are. Like I love what you're doing. It's like you're getting the message out, and I want to get the message out any way I can, and then go beyond that. And we're building technology, right? I'm working with a doctor, and we're building technology to help doctors communicate with patients and let them, stay on track with their health and their food intake, and certain markers that we can monitor remotely with the app and communicate. I want to work with people in changing the farming system. I want to do so many things, and we're doing that at sapien.org, which is kind of my bigger mission.
Wow, that is powerful. And I know you've gone around the world and you've been interviewing people, but you've also just taken some vacations. What are the things that you've seen that kind of reinforce what you believe in, returning to these ancestral practices?
Yeah, it's really interesting to get out of America and see what the rest of the world does and how healthy or not healthy they are. And I found that, I actually was down in Peru and in Brazil, and people were so healthy there. It's like 90% of them were so healthy and strong, and they ate simple foods, and they just ate steak, and they ate whatever, was just not processed. And then you could see the few people that were in bad shape. These were the like lesser well-off people, the people selling treats and snacks and sodas on the beach. They were the only ones overweight. These people pushing around the carts, selling the processed garbage. And so it's pretty easy to see that divide. I mean, everywhere I go outside of America, I see great things and people doing things a lot better than us. And it always revolves around food as the first thing. And it always revolves around fatty meat. It seems like, I mean, I went to Japan and just all I saw were advertisements for fatty meat. And then I was like, hey, wait, I thought people in Japan just eat rice and fish like every, second month. Well, no, they actually regard fat as a health food. So that was really great.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I've been to Peru and I actually noticed something a little bit different. I noticed that the people closest to the land, actually the people who lived on farms far from the city, seemed to exude a vibrance and a health that the people in the city, even if they had means, didn't have.
Yeah.
The people of the lower socioeconomic classes I actually saw as healthier than the students I saw at the university who looked pale and were staring at their computers all day. And I just was like, whoa, I could see that facial structure changing just as Dr. Price indicated it would when we made our diet less nutrient dense.
Yeah, so actually I was talking about the city people who are in bad shape, the poor people, but you're very correct. In Peru, I was in Ollantaytambo, like in the Sacred Valley up in this archaeological site, and we had a tour guide local who lived actually way up in the mountains, and he'd come down each day from the very tops of the mountains where he lived with his little community and do tours with people, and he pointed out this old woman, and she was 80 something, and he's like, look at her teeth, and she smiled and just had a full set of teeth, and she was just so happy and just was still healthy and walking around, and it was awesome.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, I'm actually getting ready to head out to Australia. So I'm eager to see what traditions are still being kept there and what contrasts I'll see between those still close to the land and living as our ancestors did and those who are kind of losing their way. So I'm hopeful that all of us together, Brian, can really keep getting the word out and making a difference. And I will put a link in the show notes to what you're up to, and we can keep getting the word out.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited about your Australia trip. We talked a little bit about it, and I'd love to support you in that because I think it's really important to, go on these trips and take over where Dr. Price left off. And I think it would be great if you had some support in that too. I know we were talking about getting a crowdfunding page together for you. And I mean, I love that. And hopefully people, will support both of us in our mission. I mean, we're just trying to get the word out there, and it's hard sometimes. We need help.
Yeah, it definitely takes a village. We definitely need the whole team of folks who believe in healthy eating and following ancestral food ways and traditions. And we have a dying planet, basically, I think. So the time is now, right?
Yeah. Yep. This is a time. This is a generation that's going to make the change. Like, we're kind of at the turning point right now, and I'm pretty hopeful. And I think we can do it.
I think so too. Well, I want to wrap up by asking you the question I often ask the guests at the end, Brian. If the listener could do one thing to improve their own health, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, I talk about diet so much, so I won't talk about diet. I think the most important thing is getting out and doing an activity once a week with a group or by yourself, but kind of put it on a schedule and do it. And I think it's important to be outside, to be active, and to engage with other people. So for me, that's, say, beach volleyball, something like that, where I know that I'm going to maybe not make a bad eating decision because I want to be in better shape, or I'm going to work out, on a Wednesday when I don't want to because I want to be ready for my basketball game or my beach volleyball game. So I want to encourage people to find some kind of hobby, sport, anything outdoors, and just make a commitment, join a group and do it every week.
Oh, that's great. No one's ever told us to do beach volleyball at the end of the podcast, so I love it.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, whatever it is, whether it's beach volleyball or something else active, get out there, do it, and be strong, everybody. Thank you so much for your time, Brian. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Hilda.
Our guest today was Brian Sanders. Breaking news! I just found out that Brian's Indiegogo campaign for his documentary Food Lies ends tonight, Monday, April 1st. So go right away to Indiegogo.com and make a gift of any size to his Food Lies Post campaign. I've put a link in the show notes to make it super easy for you to do it. And thank you in advance. Also, if you want to find out more about my trip to Australia, where I'm basically retracing the footsteps of Dr. Price, go to my website, holistichilda.com. The foundation is already backing this trip in part, for which I'm very thankful, but I need more help to make it happen. So join me in this mission of lifting up wise traditions worldwide, and thanks in advance. And for the complete show notes for this and all podcast episodes, just go to our website, westinaprice.org. And that's it. Let's keep in touch, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks for listening today. We have all kinds of resources to support you on your health journey. On the Weston A. Price Foundation website, you'll find podcasts, blogs, articles, and brochures related to just about any health topic you can imagine. You can also find a local chapter to help you discover sources of real, organic food in your area. And you can become a member to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism. Visit westinaprice.org for all this and more. And remember that the Wise Traditions podcast is available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.